Hello and welcome back, and that is right, today we want to talk about the Minisforum MS-01 and the MS-A2, and hopefully by the end of this video you'll know which one is the right for you. Both of these are workstation solutions that are rolled out from the brand Minisforum. Now, the MS-01 is largely considered the darling of the world of mini workstation machines. Although it's, up against stiff competition from lots of mini PC manufacturers out there, the MS-01 in the last year or so has pretty much become the behemoth, equipped with two 10G connections, two 2.5G connections, three M.2 inside, and a scalable CPU that can go from an i5 to an i9 and all the way up to 32 gig of memory included in the bundle package from the brand. It has become very, very desirable. Notwithstanding you can add smaller form factor PCIe cards, it is eminently scalable, but somehow manages to be this small. Now, when the MS-A2 was first revealed at CES 2025, a lot of users were like, whoa, is that a follow-up? Is that something that I should think about? Because this is the AMD alternative. Rocking out with very, very similar specs. Rocking out with 10G, 2.5G. It's got USB Type 4. It has got PCIe scalability, those three M.2 NVMe's. However, with a very distinct price difference, a lot of users are wondering about which one to go for. So, number one, let's talk about that price tag, because between the two of them, it has to be said that the MS-01 is doing very well from staying in the market for as long as it has done. And now, if you go to Minisforum's own website, I'm going to use their own website, although pricing varies depending on where you look online. I will say, if you want to go for the base level model, that is with a 12th generation i5 and no additional memory or storage, you can pick it up for about $419. That price scales up if you go for the 13th generation i9 with 32 gig of memory and 1 TB of storage. It goes all the way up to $839, which again, we're getting into desktop PC territory at that point. Now, the MS-A2, although not as competitive and also hasn't been in the market long enough to really stretch its muscles price-wise, I will say is still pretty darn good. Now, if you go for the base level model that's got the separate generation of the Ryzen 9 processor in there, it arrives at 639 Nika. That is without any memory or SSD included there. However, if you go ahead and go for the model that's got the more powerful 9955 Ryzen 9 processor there and scale it up with additional memory and storage, it goes up to a whopping $1,103 there. That is a lot of bunts. Now keep in mind, the two CPUs you're choosing there seem very, very similar, but one's a Zen 4 and one's Zen 5 architecture. But I think right now, if you are looking at a workstation like either of these, and you're thinking about price, which you probably shouldn't, for no other reason than these are very unique mini PCs. If price is that's most important to you, obviously the MS-01 is going to be the one that gets your money, largely because it is not only cheaper on their own website, but other, your Amazons, your AliExpress, your etc., etc. But what about value? What are you getting for that money? Now, by value, what I mean is, what are you getting for your money in terms of what you're laying down? And I say right now, though they're very similar, as mentioned, three M.2 slots, both of them have got 10G and 2.5G, both of them have got PCI upgradability, both of them have got dual SODIMM slots there for the memory upgrades at DDR5. I will say, this CPU, the AMD side, just gives you way, way more. Notwithstanding, it has got more cores, it has got more threads, it has a higher clock speed, a higher graphical capability than that, a higher maximum memory straight out of the gate. The only thing you can say for the Intel side, notwithstanding you may have an affinity with AMD or Intel processors to start with, is that it has a lower TDP. Now, you would expect that from a less highfalutin CPU, but just keep in mind that both of these are running CPUs that are still pretty bloody impressive at 2025, but the AMD 9 processor there has just got more to give you. And if you're already looking at powerhouse mini PCs, that CPU is already going to draw you in quite significantly. Neither one of them supports ECC from what I can see, but still nonetheless, in terms of power and ROI on the money you're laying down, that CPU clinches it. Also, they both utilize that fantastic kind of slide out mechanic if you want to get inside both of these systems. But I will say the newer generation device does benefit from an improved cooling system that has been funneled around the system. They've sort of rejigged the lineup there internally. So although it seems very similar in their external case, and I will say the A2 does have a little bit better design in terms of its internal cooling. Now, remember earlier on when I talked about the Zen 4, Zen 5 architecture of the A2 and the 13th and 12th generation processors inside the MS-01? Well, ultimately, what that comes down to is not only the number of lanes that are available to be separated across the hardware, but also the bandwidth and performance of those individual lanes. And there is just more to play with on the A2, and it never becomes any clearer anywhere else more than on the M.2 NVMe slots. Those 3 slots, I said both of them can support up to 3 M.2 NVMe's inside, therefore giving you a higher storage capability, but also the performance of those M.2s we have to talk about. Because on the MS-01, you've got 1 Gen 4 x 4 slots, you're looking at 7,000 megabytes per second SSDs. You have 1 Gen 3 x 4 slots, you're looking at about 3,300 megabytes per second SSDs. But you've also got 1 Gen 3 x 2 slots. You're looking at, again, 15 to 1600 megabytes per second SSDs on that 3rd slot. Now, with the newer generation device, you've got 3 Gen 4 x 4 slots. That's 3 slots of storage with up to 8 TB on each bay. And again, that's the same on both of them. But each one of those slots can hit a potential 7,000 megabytes per second on modern SSDs. It's technically 8,000 megabytes per second bandwidth, but modern Gen 4 SSDs at Gen 4 x 4 hit around 7,000 megabytes per second read and around 6.5 megabytes per second write. There's an enormous performance difference there in terms of storage capability. So I mentioned just now about enhanced cooling on the newer generation A2 device. Just how exactly does that shake out when the device is in operation? Well, I had the MS-01 and the MS-A2 set up for 1 hour and then 24 hours. In the 1 hour, I used the device consistently with a 10 gig connection, and over the 24-hour period, it was intermittent and mixed. And I'd say, for the most part, at least in the 1 hour, there wasn't a huge amount of difference, but the enhanced cooling did seemingly give the MS-A2 the edge later on over time. So, that cooling, although it seemed very small, I will say that the A2 ultimately ended up with the better long-term temps overall. Moving on, let's talk about graphical handling here, and although both of these systems aren't really optimal gamer rigs, I will say that they do have pretty decent graphical capabilities for mini PCs, again bordering on the workstation. I went ahead and did the Steel Nomad light test, utilising the graphical benchmarking tools you can see here on screen, and although they were largely the same at first, I will say overall that the MS-01 absolutely dominated towards the end. How much that was to do with the XE graphics or perhaps even enhanced capability, I will say that at least in graphical testing, the MS-01 definitely took the lead. However, when it came to running a benchmark of the individual threads, needless to say, the MS-A2 took the lead, largely down to, of course, the fact that that system has more cores, more threads, and ultimately that enhanced architecture made up for the difference. So overall, better graphical handling there on the MS-01, but an overall better, more capable CPU to be spread out on the A2. And moving away from max CPU and max graphics for gaming, what about just traditional workstation PC use? So I went ahead and utilised PC benchmarking here to go through. If you're not familiar with it, this basically runs a bunch of virtual scenarios of everything from spreadsheets to docs to video, conference calls, multimedia playback and more. And overall, although the results were kind of give and take across the board, and you would have assumed that the A2 would have dominated with that denser and more ready to spread out core thread ratio, I will say they're a little closer than I thought. Overall, the A2, the MS-A2 did take the lead, but I will say it wasn't a complete win. It wasn't like some of the doubling down on numbers we saw earlier with graphics and CPU threads and core testing, but overall, across all 3 tests, it kind of highlighted that the MS-A2 is probably the better all-round choice. Ultimately, it'll come as no surprise that between the 2 of these, right now, halfway through 2025, I would probably recommend the A2. It is more expensive, but it pretty much gives you everything that the MS-01 does, but it just gives you more of it. More bandwidth, more performance, more threads, more power. And yes, that does result in an increased temperature. And if again, you can look at our reviews of the MS-01 and MS-A2 where we've done thermo testing and using a thermal imaging camera to see the heat being generated. But the cooling system on these is still pretty darn good. Ultimately, as long as you're prepared to put up with higher power consumption and you're not completely in love with an Intel processor, you're going to get more out of this. Yes, it's more expensive, but you, in terms of value, are getting more bang for your buck. The MS-01 is still a phenomenal mini workstation PC and still one of the best, outclassing everyone in the market right now. But it has to be said that 1 year on, the A2 seemingly gives more to you. So just be aware right now of how far your money can go. Now, I've got links in the description to both of these, along with other videos and articles that I've done on both of these devices linked below. I recommend you check them out. But if you found the video helpful, and if you're going to go to the shops that I've linked below anyway, please use those links to do so. It results in a small commission coming to here at NAScompares and allows me and Eddie to keep doing what we do. We've also done videos utilizing these as NAS flash servers, and I'll link to those below. I recommend you check those out. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.